MS Now's Ali Vitale is following Rubio's testimony on Capitol Hill. Also with us, Elise Jordan, co-host of MS Now's The Weekend Prime Time and former advisor at the Bush State Department. Claire and Jonathan are still here. So, Ali, Rubio delivered this testimony after arguing that the War Powers Act, which requires Trump to get congressional authorization for the war, is unconstitutional. What stood out to you today?
Well, certainly the idea that Rubio is here, Chris, basically to not make a ton of news when it comes to Iran or any of the other potential entanglements that the Trump administration might pursue. I'm thinking, for example, of Cuba. I'm wondering about the boat strikes that took place prior to the Venezuela action earlier this year. All of those were topics on the table. But when it comes to Iran, you even saw that these senators were trying to highlight, for example, the Strait of Hormuz being open before the actions of the war took place. But you also saw Senator Cory Booker trying to make the point that the war is still going on, even as Senator Rubio, or rather former Senator Rubio, now Secretary Rubio, was trying to say it was over. Just watch that moment. It was striking.
Mr. Rubio, you keep telling us how we're winning this war. The president keeps saying,
well, the war's over.
Completely annihilated. The war is not over. And yet the American people see how we're losing at the pump and with their costs. And yet this thing still hasn't been resolved. Every day he tweets out, oh, we've obliterated them. We've annihilated them. They're going to surrender. But yet we still find ourselves spending billions of dollars a week
Senator
on
Booker,
a war abroad.
You've gone way over.
Now, one of the other threads here, Chris, was the fact that many of these senators who served with Rubio when he was on this very committee for many years made the point that there's a lack of transparency coming from this Trump administration on everything from intelligence assessments to legal assessments and underpinnings to the current Iran war. Senator Jeanne Shaheen led off by saying to Rubio, if you were still a senator, this is not the kind of transparency that you would accept. Of course, now Rubio is on the other side of the ledger there to testify. This is just the first of several moments that we'll see Rubio in front of lawmakers. He's got another hearing later this afternoon in front of a House subcommittee on appropriations. And then tomorrow he's back in front of the House Foreign Affairs Committee for more grilling on this and other issues.
Oh, thank you for that, Ali. So, Elise, you worked at the State Department. Was it a lot tougher for Rubio today after Trump said he found the peace talks very boring?
Well, I actually thought that this was a fairly solid hearing for Rubio, all things considered, and considering the ground that he's operating on with the administration's lack of transparency and this war having been a disaster. He navigated it pretty deftly. I mean, my takeaway was that he has just really changed fundamentally as it relates to foreign policy from the more neoconservative candidate in the 2015 era, and then now to being coming across as more of a realist and managing to sound even normal within this Trump administration. So he struggled to defend Iran, and he stressed that the Strait of Hormuz was the opening points for negotiation. And then it would go from there to enter the next phase where they discuss what they're going to do with the highly enriched uranium and the nuclear program. But it wasn't as tough of a slog as I expected, frankly, under the circumstances that he's appearing.
I wonder, Claire, then, as you watch it, and just generally, Marco Rubio, who is trying to keep his job, but also may think he would make a good president. How thin is that tightrope?
Yeah, I don't understand Marco.
Because you served at the same time he was in the Senate.
No, we served together, and he knows that they are playing hide the ball here. He knows that this is a confusing mess. And, he's trying to, thread a needle. And, he's good at threading a needle. But at the end of the day, if I would have been tempted, if I was on that panel, I would have been tempted to ask, what happened to you?
Would you have really done that?
Yeah. What happened to you? And I would have had the report he co-signed about Russian interference in the 2016 election that he was the co-author of along with Mark Warner in the Intelligence Committee. And I would have said, you signed this. Are you saying that you lied when you signed this? Are you saying this report? And because I think that would have set the table for a guy who has lost his bearings and what he believes in. I don't think he's done. I think there'll be other moments that he'll struggle with more than maybe he's struggled so far in this hearing. But it's very hard to keep up with what Marco Rubio believes in. And I think that's a very difficult place from which to run for president.
Is anybody who's running for president every time they're on TV, Lamir, essentially being watched by the president of the United States and judged and rated on some sort of imaginary blackboard?
At least Marco Rubio is. I mean, he's being mindful of what could be used against him in a future campaign. We know the New York Times had a really terrific story over the weekend about how Trump is fond of polling advisors informally. Who do you like better, Rubio or Vance? Rubio or Vance? He's made it clear he hasn't decided which one he'll give his blessing to in 2028. But, I mean, it's also returning to the matter at hand. I mean, I also found that Rubio's appearance today just is indicative of an administration that's flailing right now in terms of Iran. They don't have a way out. The president is desperate to find an off-ramp. I wrote a piece for The Atlantic nearly a month ago about how he was saying an outside advisor said that Trump was bored with the conflict, with all that's going on in Iran. The president helpfully confirmed that on the record yesterday to our friends.
Now he's really bored.
To friends at CNBC. But it's bored, but it's also frustrated that he needs to try to find in his mind some sort of deal here that gives him a win, even any kind of win he can sell to say that it's better than the deal that Obama struck a decade ago. And so far, he hasn't been able to find it. And frankly, they're moving backwards away from a substantial agreement. Yeah,
and I agree with everything you said. The question is sell to himself or sell to the American people, which are two different things. Elise, I mentioned the reports of this expletive-filled conversation between Trump and Netanyahu. Where do you see that relationship going?
Well, Netanyahu still needs Trump more than Trump needs him. And, hopefully it happened. I just hope that the conversation happened and that he isn't letting Netanyahu just run roughshod and do whatever he wants and destroy the Middle East and any hope of peace that we have and destroy any basis for negotiation. So, the Israelis obviously denied the tenor of the conversation, but then now it does look like there is another tentative ceasefire with Hezbollah and Israel. So we shall see with regards to Lebanon. So hopefully that actually is an accurate report.